8:30, just because I think I'm going to help Rabbi Moshe out.
Yeah, I hope that I'm also going today. So.
Oh,
I think Rabbi Levin and I are going together. So. Okay, this is a maamar. The Rebbe said, as you can see at the top of the page, Shabbos Chanukah Tavshin Mem Ches. The Rebbe stopped saying maamar in Tavshin Mem Ches, basically, after the passing of the Rebbetzin, a few months after Chanukah, on Chaf Beis Shvat. And the Rebbe said two short maamarim after that, basically, but so this was the last Chanukah maamar that the Rebbe said. It's a very, very special maamar. It deals with the sugya of Achdus Hashem, the unity of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the Rebbe ultimately, generally we talk about two different levels of unity. What's called Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata. Upper level unity, lower level unity. Lower level unity, well, when you say Shema Yisrael, this is something that is brought right away in Shayichud Vamun and Tanya. When you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is called upper level unity. That the whole world is completely bottled to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, nullified to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, a level of reality which we'll see in the maamar and we'll discuss more. I'm just putting the words out there now so that we'll know what they are when we run into them. It's called Bittul B'Metzias, a state of nullification, an existence of nullification. Yichud Tata, which is expressed by virtue of those words that we say in Kriya Shema, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Va'ed. Malchus, what's Malchus? The Eibushter is the king. It's the king of. I guess there's a world, right? And so therefore, the reality of what you and I call yesh, created existence, is a given. But we understand that yesh, that reality, is ultimately bottled to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That reality is designed to serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's not in any way, shape, or form separate from him, but there is such a reality of the world, right? So there's a level of unity of a Kadosh Baruch Hu within the context of the world that the Eibushter created. There's also a level of unity that transcends the world, right? That for all intents and purposes, the world, we'll see, there's going to be a third level far beyond that, but generally we talk about those two levels, and that is Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad, God is one, meaning all of reality is bottled to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and true reality is Him. And Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus, which is Bittul Hayesh, Yichud Tata, lower level unity. There is a world, but the world ultimately is the place that should reveal Elokus. Shouldn't be contrary to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but should be consistent and in harmony with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So basically, we'll see more when we see inside. There's going to be a third level. How is that all relevant to Chanukah? We'll see. It's interesting, and there's just so well. I mean, some of you do understand this, but say this, I'll explain. It doesn't matter. We're looking at a maamar in a book that's called Sefer Maamarim Melukat Dalet, right? Volume 4. Now, this is how it originally came out. It's now, we'll talk about how it came out in a new form about 5-10 years ago, whatever. They started printing it slightly differently, which has its advantages, but has its disadvantages. After the Rebbe stopped saying maamarim, so the Rebbe started editing maamarim. So we would get maamarim for every major holiday. There would be a Yud Tes Kislev maamar for the year. For that year, Tavshin Nun, Tavshin Nun Alva, Yud Tes Kislev maamar would come out for that year. But it wasn't a maamar the Rebbe said in the Farbrengen on Yud Tes Kislev that year, because the Rebbe stopped Farbrengen during the week. The Rebbe only Farbrengen every Shabbos, but did not Farbrengen during the week anymore. No big Farbrengens with a microphone, etc., etc. Those stopped after the passing of the Rebbetzin. Don't ask why. Right? I don't assume anybody knows. I'm sure people have theories, but I don't think anybody knows. So the maamarim that we started to get, now there was already a sefer called Maamarim Melukat, collected maamarim, that was put together by a number of a number of very important maamarim, and a lot of maamarim that the Rebbe said in Tavshin Lamed Ches, the year that the Rebbe had the heart attack and was saying maamarim Meitzi Shabbos. A lot of those maamarim are printed in that book. We learned Maim Rabim, so that we learned it out of that sefer, Maamar Melukatim, a collection of maamarim. In Tavshin Mem Zayin and Mem Ches, those 2 years, the Rebbe started giving out also edited maamarim. The Rebbe started editing his own maamarim. Up until that point, there weren't edited maamar. Right? What's an edited maamar? The Rebbe, as far as I understand, the way it worked, the Rebbe would ask Rav Yoel to edit a particular maamar. Rav Yoel would write it up, give it into the Rebbe. It would go back and forth a few times with obviously certain changes, and the Rebbe would add footnotes, etc. And that maamar would come out as an edited maamar. That started in Tafshin Mem Zayin, 1987. 1987 and 88, and the Rebbe was still saying maamar, but those maamarim were coming out also. Those maamarim were put together in a book at the end of Tafshin Mem Ches, 1988. They were put together in a book, and that was called Maamarim Melukatim Base. In Tafshin Mem Tes, 89, the Rebbe, we didn't hear any maamarim. There were two short maamarim that year, Matzazu and Pesach, and there was a short maamar right before Shavuos that ended up really turning into a sicha. But basically no maamarim. So that year we got a lot of almost every major holiday there was a maamar that came out, and there's a whole volume, and that's melukat Gimel. We're looking at the maamarim that came out in Tafshin Nun, 1990. That's melukat dalet. 1991 was melukat Hey. 1992 Tafshin Nun base was melukat Vav. That ends the last maamar that we have that the Rebbe edited was the famous maamar Veata Tetzava, which Moshe asked about. Are we going to learn that? And yes, we're going to learn that relatively soon. Okay, but before Purim, we're going to get to that. So that's how melukat works. Now, at a certain point, what they did, which has its advantages but has its disadvantages, what they did was they divided these 6 books into 4 books, 3 months each, and put all of the maamarim about Tishrei and up to Kislev in one volume, all the maamarim in the next 3 months, all the maamarim around Pesach and Shavuos, then all the maamarim in the summer. So they made 4 volumes. And so there will be 5-6 maamarim for each, for Yutes Kislev, there'll be 5 or 6 maamarim in that volume. So on one hand, that's very useful, because if you want to look up for, a maamar for Yutes Kislev, you pick one volume, okay, let's see what is there, and okay, fine. The disadvantage in a shul, the disadvantage of that is that one guy takes all the maamarim. One guy takes a book, he took all the maamarim, whereas there used to be 6 books, that you have 5 books. Okay, but that's obviously a separate issue. What is unfortunate about that, and personally I still stick with this, and I also this is the page I remember. So, but here we go. What's useful about this in those years? So the Rebbe would often deal with a particular what's called a sugya in Chassidus. What's a sugya? A sugya is a particular discussion in the Gemara. When the Gemara has a discussion about something, we call it a sugya. Oh, that the sugya on Chanukah. That's what we're starting to learn today in Gemara. The sugya on Chanukah. Where's that sugya? It's in Shabbos. There's a sugya about this, a sugya about in the Gemara, and we call it a sugya. What sugya you're learning? Oh, we're learning the sugya on verifying shtaros. Okay, sugya in the 2nd chapter in Ksuvas. A lot of people in this yeshiva are learning that sugya right now. Okay, a sugya, a discussion. In these volumes, the Rebbe would often discuss the same thing a few times in different maamarim. So there was a particular sugya that the Rebbe was dealing with in maamarim in that year, Tafshin Nun, when the Rebbe was editing maamarim. He's editing maamarim. They're all about. A number of them would be about the same idea. You don't get that feel at all when they're all pushed together in the year. You only get it when you're dealing with these books. So if you want to make yourself a chalata that I want to learn the Rebbe's edited maamarim, so do it like this, because you'll get a much greater sense of what the Rebbe is doing each year. So get the 6-volume set as opposed to the 4-volume set. The font in the 4-volume set is better. It was printed later, it's clearer, there's no question. Okay, fine. But that's not what it's all about. It's not only font, right? Font isn't the only thing that matters in the world. Okay? So now, this maamar, as we'll see right away, is based on a maamar that the Friedrich Rebbe said in Taf Reish Tzadi Ches. So that's what, 1938, okay, which is, right, Rebbe was in Poland, Tafresh Tzadi, the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Poland those years. Right? Got out of Poland in 1940, miraculously. Right? Arrested by German intelligence. The German intelligence was anti-Nazi generally, and the American government still had diplomatic relations with Nazi Germany until Pearl Harbor. So they used those diplomatic relations to get in touch with the people they knew in German intelligence. And the Rebbe was hunted down in Warsaw by German intelligence and arrested by German intelligence, who tried to keep him out of the hands of the SS. Took the Rebbe through Germany, because they had to process the Rebbe in Germany, and then put him on a boat in Stockholm to get to American freedom. So the German intelligence saved the Rebbe, which is really astounding. It's an amazing story, absolutely amazing. The guy who did it also, a very strange-looking fellow. He had a bizarre face, but very amazing that this guy. I mean, my goodness gracious, talk about buying your place in Elam Haba with one moment. This guy certainly did that, right? And there was a lot of anti-Hitler in German intelligence. The people who tried to blow up the train, they were the people with the suitcase in the leg of the table got in the way, whatever. Obviously, he was supposed to be around. Why? Who knows? But German intelligence, they actually uncovered some very fascinating letters from a letter of a son who was involved in the plot to blow up the train. So he wrote his father, should I give up my life in order to try to kill the Führer? And his father writes back, the letter's been found. The father wrote back to his son, it is a duty to the motherland to do this, to kill this man. He's destroying our country. I mean, there were a few people out there who saw that, obviously. I mean, no way. It's obviously not every single German followed like a sheep. This absolute maniac who was destroying the country. He was definitely destroying the country. He tried to destroy the whole world, but he definitely destroyed their country. There's nothing about that.
So I think I may have misunderstood. Did you say this maamar was in 1938?
The Frierdiker Rebbe said a maamar in 1938.
Okay.
This maamar is based on the Frierdiker Rebbe's maamar. This maamar was said in 1988, which is the 50th anniversary of that maamar, and very, very often, the Rebbe will say maamarim at a particular anniversary of maamarim of previous Rebbeim. 100 years, 150 years, 200 years, 180 years, 70 years, 50 years. It's very, very common. So here the Rebbe is saying, now it's also interesting that we take for granted that we have unlimited Chassidus on the shelves. Don't take that for granted. The reason you have unlimited Chassidus on the shelves is because the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as soon as he became Rebbe, started getting kahas to start printing books. There were no books. And the Rebbe just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and forced them. They didn't want to print it. They weren't making money printing the books. The people weren't buying the books. I mean, the Chassidim were buying the books, but this is not a bestseller where you're making money. And so it was costing money, and Kahas was having to raise money, etc. But the Rebbe was pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and so all of the Chassidus that we have, it's all because the Rebbe said print it, right? That's why. Right, and very often in the front of a regular, other books, it'll say right in the front, "Lefi Hayras Kfei Kedushas Admar Shlipa." Based on the instruction of the Rebbe, we are printing this book. Right, almost every book. Right? And so Tzadi Ches, interesting enough, had just come out the year before. The Sefer Maimarim Tafresh Tzadi Ches of the previous Rebbe. It's actually printed Tafresh Ches Tzadi, because Tafresh Tzadi Ches, if you read it, it says Tirtzach, which means you will murder. So it's written Tafresh Ches Tzadi. They just switched the letters. So that came out in Tafshin Mem Zayin. Came out a year before the Rebbe said this maamar. Right, so people had the maamar. It was around. Now, it's funny, I don't have a memory for these sort of things generally, but I distinctly remember when Tzadi Ches came out. I don't know why. When Tzadi Ches came out, and I remember going to Chabad. Chabad was the only place you could buy Lubavitch books in those days. And I remember going to Kas and Chabad and buying it. And I don't remember why that book more than any other, but I remember distinctly buying Tzadi Ches. And there weren't a lot of books. They were still coming out. The Rebbe was printing and printing and printing. Okay, now the discussion, we'll get to see another machlokas once we get into the maamar a little, because there's an interesting disagreement about this holiday called Chanukah, which we're going to start a week from tonight. Wednesday night is Chanukah. Veata berachamecha Rabbim. This is from Al Hanisim, right? Al Hanisim is the extra prayer that we add in benching and Shemona Esrei throughout the whole 8-day holiday of Chanukah.
Makes it longer.
It definitely makes it longer. Veata berachamecha Rabbim, and you in your great mercy, amadetem lem beis tzarasim. You stood in the time of their trouble. Masarta giborim biyad chaloshim. You gave the strong into the hands of the weak. Rabim biyad ma'atim. The many in the hands of the few, etc. So that's Al Hanisim. Umedayek kfei dushis meri chami admer b'ma'amarei dibur maskal zeh. And he explains carefully, my father-in-law, the Rebbe, and now our Rebbe, we know this. Many of you know this. If you don't know this, so now you'll know this. Our Rebbe, generally, our Rebbe is my maamar based on my maamar of the previous Rebbeim. And usually, more often than not, the maamar of his father-in-law, his Rebbe. But not always. I mean, there were times. There's clearly times in I think Lamed Gimel, Lamed Beis, around there. The Rebbe was clearly learning my maamar of the Rebbe Marash, because almost every maamar was explaining a maamar of the Rebbe Marash. Right? The Rav Chaim Shalom Deitch was in Yechidus by the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe about learning, and he asked the Rebbe what should he learn. So the Rebbe said, "We'll learn what I learned." So what the Rebbe learn? So the Rebbe said, Niglin Chassidus. What should you learn? Niglin Chassidus? So then he asked a very interesting question. What's the Rebbe learning in Chassidus? Asked the Rebbe, what's Chassidus is the Rebbe learning? The Rebbe said, right now, I'm focusing on the Rebbe Marash. And if you look at the Maimarim in those years, so the Maamar after Maamar after Maamar was explaining Maimarim, the Rebbe Marash. It's just fascinating, right? So the Rebbe is learning everything all the time, but there's also things the Rebbe is focusing on more than anything else. The Rebbe finished Shas every year, but I would assume the Rebbe also took one Masechta and learned it more carefully. Also learned it. I mean, finishing Shas didn't mean the Rebbe was reading in the middle. The Rebbe once told the Bacher, this is depressing for the rest of us, but okay, it's all right. The Rebbe once told the Bacher who said he had a hard time learning Be'iyun, learning in-depth Gemara. So the Rebbe said, okay, so then don't learn Be'iyun, just learn Gemara Rashi basis. Now for you and I, that's called Be'iyun. But for the Rebbe, that's called, just... So when, finishing Shas meant Gemara Rashi basis, that's clear, everything on the page. But I would assume that there were sugyas that the Rebbe was learning, in depth with all the Rishonim, etc., etc. Right? What it means to learn something after you've already memorized it Baal Peh, I'm not sure. But, the Gedolim of our generation also, Bechlal, the Gedolim of every generation, also ours. I'll say Rav Moshe Feinstein first, so you won't think I'm just flying the flag. Rav Moshe Feinstein, so he memorized, they say that he memorized Shas by the time he was 16 years old. Now he was a Rav into his 90s, which means he sat and learned Gemara for the next 75 years after he knew it off by heart. Right? So what does that mean? What is learning? It's a different learning if you already know it off by heart. You're noticing things that are much more nuanced. So the Rebbe, they say 15, the Rebbe knew Shas Baal Peh. The Rebbe used to finish Shas every year, make a siyum on Shas. Generally, it was the Yotes Kislev for bringing, and it often became the Chaf Dalet Davis for bringing, but the Rebbe make a siyum on Shas, right, every year. Right? So also my maamar. Obviously, the Rebbe is learning my maamar and learning, but
you said the Rebbe Marash.
Rebbe Marash is the father of the Rebbe Rashab, who is the father of the previous Rebbe, who is the father-in-law of our Rebbe. Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab passed away in 1920. His father, Rebbe Marash, the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe. There's 7 Rebbe. Okay. So, umedayik kvedis meichamiyad maamar dibur maskal zeh shenemar lifnei chamishim shana, that he said 50 years ago. Tafresh tzadichetz. And again, interesting enough, that was though that sefer had just come out. All right. Hare ikar hanes de Chanukah hu nes nitzachon hamilchama. The essential nes of Chanukah is the victory in the war. Shaya v'chaf dalet Kislev, which was on the 24th of Kislev. That's when the war ended. That's when we won the war. Va'ad shezeh haya gam hasiba, to such an extent, this is also the reason and the cause lahanes de pach Hashemen shaya v'chaf hei Kislev, for the miracle of finding the flask of Shemen that happened on the 25th of Kislev. Because after all, if we hadn't won the war, we couldn't go into the Beis Hamikdash and purify the Beis Hamikdash and look for the flask of it, look for Shemen to light the menorah. We wouldn't be able to do that because we would still be fighting, or we wouldn't have control of the Beis Hamikdash. So obviously the single most important thing seems to be the victory in the war. Kidi Isa, like it says B'Gemara, which some of us will see today, Ukashugavru Beis Chashmonai, that when they overcame the house of Chashmonai, meaning they won, V'nitzch, and they emerged victorious, Az Davka, then after that, Matzu Pach Echad Shel Shemen, they found a jug of oil. Nasa B'Nes, a nace happened with that Shemen, V'idliku Mimenu Shmeni Shemen. That's all the Gemara. The Gemara explains that miracle. Now, interesting, the Gemara does not mention at any point the miracle in the war. The Gemara just says that when they entered into the Heichal, they found that the Greeks had defiled all the oil, and we found one flask, and we lit it, and it stayed lit for 8 days, and that was the miracle, and so we had a holiday. Doesn't mention the war in any way, shape, or form in the Gemara. In Ala Nisi, which we say in davening and in benching, we don't mention the miracle of the Shemen. We only mention the war, which is what we just said, right? That you put us, the strong in the hands of the weak and the many in the hands of the few. When's that? That's the war. So there is a tension in Chanukah as to what exactly is the miracle that we're celebrating. Are we celebrating the miracle of the war? Are we celebrating the miracle of the Shemen? Or are we celebrating both? Now that's a question of halacha also, as we'll see. Because if we're celebrating the miracle of the war, then it should also be there should also be an obligation to have meals of simcha on Chanukah, because we generally celebrate victories in war, meaning victories that happen in the context of physical reality, by physical simcha. In simcha b'basar b'yayin, what do? We have a meal. There's a holiday like that. What's that holiday where we celebrate the victory in a war with eating a lot? Purim. I mean, a lot of holidays, but Purim. Purim and Chanukah go together, right? Purim and Chanukah are the two, so to speak, rabbinic holidays. Exactly rabbinic, but yes, I mean, they're not written in the Torah, right? Okay. So they're holidays that come from, well, Purim is already in Nach, still, right? Still early enough that it's in Nach. Chanukah is afterwards. Okay, after Nach is already closed, so to speak. But still time of the second Beis Hamikdash, before what we would usually call the rabbinic period, right? We think of the Mishnah, so that's near the end of the time of the Second Temple, even though Lamaisa, the Zugais were much earlier, the Zugais that are listed in Pirkei Avos. Okay, the scholars that tended to be in twos. Okay, so there's a discussion as to whether or not there's an obligation to have meals on Chanukah. So is there an obligation for simcha, or, as we'll see, just halel v'hoida'ah? Spiritual response, praising God. So we don't have meals. We don't pass them meals. Rambam talks about it. We don't have special. I say that we eat latkes and we eat sufganiyot, but we don't sit down and have a meal. We sit down and have lechem mishnah and celebrate. So on Purim, we don't need lechem mishnah. So we don't have a meal. But on Purim, there's a chiyuv to wash. One of the 4 mitzvahs of Purim is mishnah, to have a meal and wash. No such mitzvah or halacha on Chanukah. So that seems to indicate that we're not really celebrating the war. We're celebrating the more spiritual aspect of the mitzvah, of the miracle.
last word, bekaslo. The last word, bekaslo.
Kislev.
Oh.
Kislev, the month. Right? So the Milchama was on the 24th, the Pach Shemen was on the 25th. Right? So Nasa b'nei Zvehidnim min Shemoniam. Lama, so now the Rebbe asks the question. This is the Frierdiker Rebbe's question in his mind. Lama kavu ascholas yemei Chanukah b'chafei b'Kislev. Why was it established, the beginning of the holiday, on the 25th day of Kislev? Shabei hayanes and neders. That was the miracle of the candles, finding the Pach Shemen. V'loy b'chav dalet b'Kislev. And not on the 24th when we won the war. Okay. Manyen. Now, what day is Purim on? Okay, depends where you are. You're fair.
13th and 14th.
No, that's not true.
14th,
14th and 15th. When did we win the war?
15th.
No.
We finished mopping up.
17th, right?
No, Mapitom. This is all written down, guys. It's in a book called Megillus Esther. Right? I hate to be annoying, but we're supposed to know stuff. Okay, Shushan Purim. Okay, well, did we or didn't we? We finished on the 13th. The day we read that the war was over, the day before, we celebrated the first day after we had finished. Finished the war on the 13th, and we celebrated on the 14th. The people in Shushan asked for one more day to mop up, so they fought on the 14th, and they celebrated on the 15th. So they celebrated that year. So they weren't celebrating the day they were fighting. They celebrated the day they stopped fighting. Manyen. So now, based on that, when would you celebrate Chanukah, even if you're celebrating the war? 25th. So there is such a position. That we'll see it in the footnote, that the Alter Rebbe brings it, that we're actually celebrating the day we rested. Okay. But Bechlal, this is just altogether a very interesting question as to when it is we're supposed to be doing what it is that we do on Chanukah. Okay, so the Frierdiker Rebbe asks if we're celebrating the Chanukah, there was no Yom Tov the first year. They established a Yom Tov for the next year. Itself was an interesting question whether there should be a Yom Tov, there shouldn't be a Yom Tov. We say the miracles happen, but did you establish a Yom Tov or not? And there was a controversy. I mean, it wasn't absolutely clear to everybody that there should be a holiday. Okay, but obviously there's a holiday. We know that, and a very important holiday. Okay, now the next year they established the holiday. So there's no reason to wait until the day you rested the next year. Right? On Purim, we celebrate the day they celebrated. When did they celebrate? Well, they finished fighting on Yud Gimel, and so they celebrated on Yud Dalet. So we celebrate Yud Dalet. They celebrated that year. We didn't celebrate in Hanukkah. There was no celebration in the first year of Hanukkah. They just won a war, and they went into the base of Mikdash and got to work. They fixed it up and started lighting the menorah, and a miracle happened. So I'd assume everybody went home and said, what is going on in the base of Mikdash? This is an unbelievable miracle. It's incredible. It's amazing. I'm sure people were saying l'chaims and having a good time, but there was no holiday. The holiday was the next year. So the next year, it also makes sense to establish the holiday on the day of the miracle of the war, the 24th, the miracle of the Shemen, the 25th. So the Rebbe's asking, why is it that we celebrate the Frierdiker Rebbe? The Rebbe's just quoting the Frierdiker Rebbe's question in that maamar in Tafresh Tzadik Ches. The Frierdiker Rebbe said the maamar in 1938. Our Rebbe in 1988 is actually 1987 and 1937, because the maamar was said Chanukah was before the Gersha calendar changed to 8. Our calendar changed their head. So it was actually, this was said in 1997 and 1987, and the Frierdiker Rebbe's maamar was in 1937. So the Frierdiker Rebbe asked the question, why don't we celebrate Chav Daled? Again, the next year, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Not pattern it after Purim. Celebrate the day that the miracle happened. When do we celebrate Pesach? The day after the miracle or the day of the miracle? The day of the miracle. That's about when we left. That's when we celebrate. No, we rested after we left. We found a nice beach and we hung out on the beach for a while. We celebrate that day. No. We celebrate the day of the miracle itself. Which makes sense the next year. Again, Purim is a little different. Because they celebrated there at the time. They made a Chag right away. Mordechai and Esther made a Yom Tov right away. That day. The next day. Okay. So the question is, why are we not celebrating? Why is Chanukah not start on Chaf Dalet? Since the Iker miracle was the war, and if it weren't for the war, the other miracles wouldn't have happened. That's the question the Frierdiker Rebbe asks. Now, the Rebbe is going to point out that that's a slightly different question than is asked in most maamarim. Let's see. V'yesh lemer. So again, the Frierdiker Rebbe's question is, why 25 and not 24? That's the Frierdiker Rebbe's question. V'yesh lemer. Dezeh shemedayik ba'maamar. That which he carefully explains in the maamar, hatam, the reason, al shekavu Chanukah b'chafei Kislev, on Chanukah on the 25th of Kislev, v'loi b'chav dalet b'Kislev, and not on the 24th of Kislev, udeloi, and not like a diuk become a drushim, and not like the careful learning in other drushim. The drushim means maamarim of other rebbeim, and also including the Frierdiker Rebbe himself. Kailil gam drushim shaschalasam hi b'dibra maskal zeh, including drushim that have exactly the same heading as this maamar, meaning the name of the maamar is Veata berachamecha Rabbi. When you ask, if someone asks you what maamar you're learning, you tell them Veata berachamecha. That's the name of the maamar you're learning, right? The name of the maamar we were learning was Pada B'Sholab, or we were learning Tana Rabbanan, or we were learning Maim Rabbim. What's the name of the maamar? The beginning of the maamar is the name of the maamar. It's not a big chiddush. The beginning of every parsha is the name of the parsha. Okay, so there are other maamarim with this dibur maskil, and what do they discuss? Madua kavu Chanukah al hanes tepach Hashemen v'loy al hanes tenitzochan hamelchama. Their question is, why is it that it was established? The Chanukah was established regarding the miracle of the pach of Shemen, the oil, and not on the miracle of the milchama. That's a different question we're asking. Our Rebbe's question, again, based on the Frierdiker Rebbe, is the Iker Nes is the milchama. Why don't we start on the 24th? In other maamarim, the question is, why is the Pach Hashem and the Iker Nes and not the Milchama? That's a different question. In our maamar, we are taking for granted that the Nes of the Milchama is the Iker Nes. And we're asking, why don't we start on the 24th? In the other maamarim, the question is, what's the Iker Nes? And the answer seems to be, or the question is, why is the Pach Hashem and the Iker Nes? Why is that the essential miracle? Why isn't the Milchama considered just as important? Yeah? Okay? Understood the difference between those two questions? Completely different questions. Right? Completely different.
So this
Our Rebbe is clear. Again, when I say our Rebbe, that means our Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, because our Rebbe is learning a maamar of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Our Rebbe is learning absolutely clearly that the essential miracle is the war. Therefore, there's a question. Why don't we start on the 24th? That's the question we're asking. That is not the question, the Rebbe points out to us, that is asked in most maamarim. In most maamarim, the question is, why is the miracle, why is the Iker miracle the oil and not the war? That's a different question. Okay? The Rebbe wants us to understand that, because the Rebbe cares about learning Torah. We could not talk about that at all, but he wants us to learn Torah, and when you learn Torah, you have to understand things. Well,
will we be answering that question as maamar, or is that just the?
what do you care?
Whether or not.
Why don't you just sit and learn this maamar and don't worry about what's going to be? I'm just telling you how to learn. Don't worry about things like that. Just see what happens, and we see what happens. Now, I assume, since we're learning that the Iker Nes is the Milchama, we're going to explain things based on that. We are not going to deal with that, but that's not my issue. Seriously, if I'm learning this maamar, I'm not bothered whether or not I'm going to deal with that or not. I don't know. I know I'm not going to deal with everything. Might I deal with that? I might, and if I do, amazing. If I don't, it's not a question to ask at the beginning of the maamar. See what happens. Let the Rebbe take you where the Rebbe is going to take you, and don't worry so much about what. There's always going to be things I don't explain. It's impossible to explain everything. We're not going to go there, but you can probably come to some understanding of it by virtue of what we're going to say. But our focus is going to be on the fact that there are two miracles.
So the previous minority said they spoke about that the main miracle was the miracle of the shaman.
And they want to know why.
So then why does the Rebbe bring here that, the main miracle is the war, therefore we should do it on the 24th?
Because there's also such a position in the world.
But,
There's such a position.
but if it's the previous maamar that said that it's the Pach Shemen, and that's all that they were talking about, why does
It's
the
a
Rebbe...
machlekes rishonim. So that's exactly what Talmud Torah is, right? There's a machlekes rishonim as to what is the ikar nes. So one could definitely try to explain things based on the position that the ikar nes is the milchama, even though there's all sorts of maimarim that also explain why the Pach Shemen is the ikar miracle. But there's no question that the Rambam's pretty downtown Judaism. So the Rambam happened. I mean, there are also maimarim that explain the milchama, right? But the Rebbe's, our Rebbe is explaining to us that when the Frierdiker Rebbe asks his question, he's asking it based on the position that the milchama is central. There are maimarim that ask why is the milchama not central? That's a different question. But there are positions that say the milchama is central. So that's where our Rebbe is. That's where our Rebbe is coming from. Meaning the Rebbe is telling us that's where the Frierdiker Rebbe is coming from. This is so interesting. The Rebbe is doing this because this is called Talmud Torah. The Rebbe doesn't have to tell us this. He's just saying there's a question and let's go. No, he wants us to really understand the issue, right? And there's an issue. There's a fascinating issue about Chanukah. And as a matter of fact, that issue is Al Nisim doesn't mention Pach Shemen. It says we found the Pach Shemen, right? Fine, and it says we lit it b'chatzos, and this is an amazing diuk of the Rebbe, because there's a sikha of the Rebbe in Chelik, in Chav Hey, where the Rebbe talks about Al Nisim, and everybody mentions that there's no neris in Al Nisim, but it says that we lit neris b'chatzos kachecha. So the Rebbe says, "No, that isn't the menorah. Chatzos Kachech is in the courtyards. We didn't light the menorah in the courtyards. We lit the menorah in the Heichel. So in Al Nisim, when it's talking about lighting lights, it's not talking about lighting the menorah. Right? It says we lit the Chatzos Kachech. What are you talking about? Chatzos Kachech? Who's lighting in courtyards? In the base of Mikdash. No one's lighting in courtyards. You light the menorah in the Heichel. The Sikhan Chayel Chav Chay, where the Rebbe is medayik in the language of Al Nisim. Now it's not talking about the menorah, because Al Nisim is all about the war, which is really interesting because there's this tension in Chanukah. Right? Al Nisim is all about the war. The Ikar mitzvah is all about Pach Hashem, and there is no mitzvah that commemorates the war in any way, shape, or form. If there were a mitzvah to commemorate the war, we already talked about it. What would that mitzvah be? Suda, in fact. We'd have a Suda. We don't. Sufganiyot don't count. Latkes don't count. That's not called a Suda. We do eat lots of food that is prepared in oil. We do, yes. So in the Ashkenazi world, it's called latkes, and in the Svardish world, there was this thing called sufganiyot, and now in Eretz Yisrael, there's these things called sufganiyot. Some people call them donuts, which is why the people who call them donuts don't ever eat their sufganiyot because they don't know how to make a sufganiyot, because they call them donuts. And if you call them donuts, so then it doesn't turn into a sufganiyot. But if you call it a sufganiyot, then it'll be a sufganiyot. If you want the best sufganiyot in the world, go to Berman's bakery and get some sufganiyot. They're hands down the best sufganiyot around. No one else makes them like Berman. Angel can't do it. Berman does it. Berman Bakery is the second biggest bakery in the country. Angel's the biggest, Angel, and Berman is the second biggest. My kids are coming to Eretz Yisrael for a wedding at the end of Tevis, right? A month after Chanukah. Our son asked my wife on a phone call yesterday, Ima, do me a favor. Buy some sufganiyot in Berman and freeze them. Because we're kind of, it was a joke, but it's a religious experience eating a sufganiyot from Berman. Like you'll feel Chanukah. Right? What? There's a Berman right by the old Yeshiva. On Yafo and the Davidka, there's a Berman's at Davidka. Right, not like around the corner.
It's on Agrippa.
On Agrippa's. On Agrippa's by the Vidka, there's a berm.
Perfect.
So it's 10 minutes away from here. And they really do. Their sufganiyot are unbelievable. They really are. You get the carbo one, or the jam one, or whatever they make. Chocolate one, they make also, but they're really good. They know how to make a sufganiya, and it's not all oily and disgusting, and you don't get indigestion after you eat one. If you eat 5, you'll get indigestion, but that'll be the same with anything.
When we finish the mimer, we'll need the.
Maybe when you finish the mime, we'll have to go get some sufganiyot from Burma. They're not cheap. They're, you can get for 2 shekels, and they're worth 2 shekels. These are much more than that. But you get yourself a Burman sufganiyah to experience an Israeli Chanukah, because they really are. It's part of the cultural experience of having Chanukah in Eretz Yisrael is to eat a good sufganiyah. So, and you better. It's funny because as soon as they're out, they're gone. Everybody knows. You go there, too late, and they're gone. There's no sufganiyot left. They're gone. Right? The people know that you got to get there early and get your sufganiyot. It's part of the Chanukah experience here in Eretz Yisrael. It's everywhere has its thing. Burman sufganiyot. So. There's a tension as to what we're celebrating, which is a fascinating tension. Now, in our Maimar, the Rebbe is pointing out, there's no tension. The Frierdiker Rebbe is learning this, Lefi, the Shita, that we celebrate both the Milchama and the miracle with the Shemen. That's how the Frierdiker Rebbe is learning, and that's what his question is. His question is not which one, his question is, since it's both, why don't we start on Chav Dalet? That's the question. The Rebbe wants us to understand that. Because there's another question, and that is, we start on Chaf Hey because it's all about Pach Hashemen. Why? That's a different question. Yeah.
How do you say Nes of Shemen? Is there a specific word for it?
The miracle of the oil.
Yeah, how would you say it? Like
Nes Hashemen. Nes Pach Hashemen. The Pach is it's like this. It was this big one.
So it's Nes
Hashemen.
Hashemen.
Nes Hashemen or Nes Pach Hashemen. The miracle of the flask of oil.
And the other one for the war is Nesh
Hamilchama. Milchama is the word for war. You want to see the word?
This one here, this one.
Yeah, it's over there somewhere. It's a few times. I can't see it. We're gonna read. We're gonna get to it in a second, and I'll make a big shtuda when we get there. Oh, actually, there's milchama there, but it's printed wrong.
Yeah, Milma.
Milma, right? So that's supposed to be milchama. I never even noticed that. See that?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a ches missing there. A printout. That's pretty bad in a book like this. That's unusual, right?
Yeah.
So again, the other drushim madua kavu Chanukah al neis tepach Hashemen v'loy al neis tenitzchach and a milchama. Who? Ki bedrushim hanal, in those drushim kai, they're standing on, they're relevant lahashita, to the position, and this is a machlekes, the Rambam and the Rosh. It's brought in the Beis Yosef. It's a machlekes in Nigla. Shayomtiv te Chanukah nikva rak al neis haneres. That the Yontif of Chanukah was established only on the Nes of the Neros, the miracle of the candles. V'lochein, therefore, medayik. Therefore, the Frierdiker Rebbe is careful to say, at first glance, ha'ikr nitzachon ha'milchama, that the ikr seems to be the victory in the war. Because after all, if it weren't for the victory of the war, there wouldn't have been any other miracles. And therefore he asks, V'lama asu mihatofel, so why do we make from that which is secondary ikr to be primary, umia ikr, that which seems to be the primary reality of the whole story, tofel, secondary. Ubahamaimer zeh kai lashita, on this maimer kai lashita shekviya sayomtiv Chanukah. In this maimer, the Rebbe is talking about the position that the establishment of the Yom Tov of Chanukah, he gam mitzad haneis milchama, is also, not only, but also as a result of the nes of nitzachon and milchama. Now, when you look in the Gemara, it just happens to be very, very interesting. The Gemara doesn't mention the milchama. It says that we went back into the base of Mikdash. When? Oh, we just had this miraculous war. Right? Okay, so it doesn't talk about it. Doesn't talk about it. So we went back into the base of Mikdash and this miracle happened. So interesting. And when you read Al Hanisim, doesn't mention the miracle of the Shabbat. Just says that we were small and they were big, and we were holy and they were impure, and we won. And we went in and we established the base of Mikdash. It does talk about the fact that we found oil. It's all about the war. Va'ad, to such an extent, shahoidah, the thanks, the Va'al Hanisim, in Al Hanisim, who be'ikr is essentially, now you notice that in brackets and there's a big footnote down there, right? But let's maybe, we'll look at that footnote, but okay, we'll look at that footnote now. Al Nes Zeh, on this miracle, the war, Voida al Hanes de Pach Hashemen, and the thanks that we give for the miracle of Pach Hashemen, Hi al Yedei Adlokas Ner Chanukah. That's by lighting Ner Chanukah. It's not mentioned in Al Hanisim, basically. V'lochin adiuk b'maimer zeh. Therefore, the careful reading in this maimer, the question in this maimer that we're learning, who zeh shemei Chanukah, these days of Chanukah, shenikva'u, and again, the Rebbe's learning according to the position that Chanukah is also a response to the miracle of the war. Shenikvu gam al hanes de nitzachon milchama, that was established also as a result of the miracle in the war. Va'adarabba, on the contrary, inyan zeh hu l'chorda ikar nes. This seems to be the essence of the nes, the most essential nes, because again, if it wasn't for this nes, nothing else would have happened. If we lost the war, then there wouldn't have been any other miracles. Va'ad, to such an extent, shezeh hayagam hasiba, this is the reason and the cause, lanes de Pach Hashemen, for the miracle of the Pach Hashemen. So the Rebbe asks, why maschilim b'chafei kislev b'fridik Rebbe? Why are we starting on the 25th? Shaboya nesa netters. That was when the miracle of the candles happened. V'lei b'chav dalet b'kislev, not on the 24th, which is the nes of the war. That's the Friedrich Rebbe's question. The Rebbe wants us to be absolutely clear what's going on and why the Rebbe is asking that question and how he's not asking the question that's in other maamar. That doesn't mean no one else ever asked this question, but that's what's going on in the maamar we're learning, the Rebbe says. That's called learning Torah, understanding what the question really is. Okay, so let's just quickly look at footnote 10. Ba'ha'maimar d'shnas, that chatzeret, right, which is tafresh tzadikas. Last footnote on the okay, look at footnote 9 also. If we're already down in the footnotes, look in footnote 9. All right. Ubeperish Mai Chanukah, which is the Gemara. B'Shabbos Sham, Gemara Shabbos over there. Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, that's where it begins. Hu zeh shetiknu ches yemei Chanukah. They established 8 days of Chanukah. All right, skip the brackets. Or zeh shetiknu limei Halel v'Hodah. And they were established as days of praise and thanks, not simcha. Ki be'ima Yom Tov hayad rak, because if the Yom Tov were only mipnei hanes de nitzachon melchama, for the miracle of the victory in the war, hayu yemei simcha, there would be days of simcha, eating, physical battle, physical response. V'lo yemei halal v'heidah, not necessarily days of halal v'heidah. We don't say about Purim days of halal v'heidah. 10. Uba'maimer de shnas taf reish tzadi ches, backwards, in order not to write that word. Shebahida'ah al hanisim, in the thanks that we give by saying al hanisim, heilech umeina, we count prate and yana nitzucha melchama. We talk about all the details of the victory in the war. But afterwards, mevarach inyan and neirus, and afterwards we do mention the inyan of the neirus, mitzias pach shemen. We do talk about finding the pach shemen, and we lit candles b'chatzos kachechon. Right? That's what the Friedrich Rebbe mentions. And it is true, it's there, but it's completely secondary to the war. And here the Rebbe says, Sorry, L'cha'ura tzarich lemar. At first glance, one must say the b'maimer zeh that in the Friedrich Rebbe's maimer mefaresh shidliku neres b'chatzos kachecho, that when it says and they lit candles in your courtyards, kayal neres the menorah, that's actually the Friedrich Rebbe seems to be saying that that's simple pshat, that's talking about the menorah, right? And so the menorah is mentioned in Al-Anisim. Then the Rebbe adds in the brackets, Re'ei barucha shak levataya bezeh, look to see at length the discussion of this, Belekutei Sichas Chelech Chafei. Yeah, I was right, Chafei. Look at that. Sometimes I'm right. In Chelech Chafei, that's where that Sicha is, and where the Rebbe says that actually Chatzos Kechecha, I mean, why does it say Chatzos Kechecha? That's not the Heichel. The Mamnar wasn't the Chatzos Kechecha, it was in the Heichel. Aval gam lefi Peirush zeh, even according to this Peirush, vidliku neres, even in saying that we're actually talking about the menorah specifically in Al-Anisim, hurak haskaras klolos immerse, it's only mentioning the general event, mibli lefaret anes, without detailing the miracle. But where's the detail in Al-Anisim? Great detail in the war, right? Ve'ikar ha'edah, and the essential thanks of Al-Anisim, Al-Nitzachon and Milchama, that's what it talks about, right? Who beat who, right? It's true, even according to that position, the Rebbe says, that we do mention the miracle of the candles at the end, and we actually talk about lighting the menorah, even according to that position, which the Rebbe says, I'm not sure that that's really what it's talking about, and go look in Lekutei Sichas Chelech Chafei, and you'll see what I have to say about it over there. But even according to that position, it's only something mentioned at the end, kalach or yad, sort of as an addition, and there's no details involved in that miracle at all, because there's no question that the emphasis of Al-Anisim is on the war. And again, so that's why we're saying the Friedrich Rebbe is learning in accordance with the Shita that says there's both the war and the candles. Okay, and that's so now we'll see what the Rebbe says about that. Meaning, there's actually 3 miracles of Chanukah, right? Winning the war, finding the shemen, and then the shemen lasting longer. The Rebbe is going to tell us that relates to 3 different levels in the unity of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, and that's also going to relate to Chav Dalet, Chav Hei, Chav Vav. There's a question arising. You mentioned this yesterday at the end of Shir. And it's a very interesting question. The third miracle of the shemen lasting for 8 days, so that miracle started on the 26th of Kislev. So why don't we commemorate that in any way, shape, or form? There's no commemoration whatsoever of that miracle. I mean, we're late for 8 days, but why don't we commemorate the fact that on the 26th of Kislev a miracle started? A separate miracle, a third miracle. On the 25th we celebrate the miracle of finding the Torah. Why don't we celebrate? Now, again, I understand we light for 8 days. Okay, but we don't make any mention in our celebration of Hanukkah of the unique nature of the 26th of Kislev, which is when the miracle starts. The Iker miracle, because I mean, not Iker in terms of importance, but the most wild miracle of the whole thing was Parach Shem. Was the 8 days. All the other 2 miracles can be explained within the context of physical reality. Right? I mean, you can win a war and you can find something. Okay, obviously it was miraculous, but it could also not be miraculous. This is beyond any explanation whatsoever according to natural order. We don't make any mention of it, though we had for 8 days that weekend. Okay. What's today? Today's Wednesday. Okay, so Hashem will be around tomorrow.
Perfect.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Is there any secret